All right, guys. So here comes some psycho stuff. We're just going to go over movement techniques, and then we'll go over movement formations today. I do have two sets of teams here. I got it, toys, whatever. But we're on a sand model table, and we've got our first element and second element for our six-man short squad or six-man gorilla cell. And then we've got our other guys over here. This is the four-man, because I think four is probably a little bit more realistic for most of you guys. And we're going to go over how both of these would probably move. Okay, now, there are three different movement techniques. Now, techniques are not movement formations. The techniques are going to be traveling. You're only going to travel whenever you are not expecting contact with the enemy, or you just simply have an overwhelming amount of force and you are much larger than your enemy and you need to go fast. If you're talking about doing a squad, these guys only have 20 meters-ish of separation between their elements, because we're not really focused on security, we're more focused on speed, and that is between the elements, right? Because between these guys, it's probably looking about to be like between 3 and 5 meters, even though it's supposed to be 5 and 10 meters. By the book, yeah, it's 5 and 10 meters, 5 meters, because that is the explosive radius of a grenade. So if a grenade lands in the middle of you, you can just barely jump away from it, and you should be okay, right? Instead of having catastrophic casualties. Yes, I realize that is not the maximum effective range of a grenade before any of you guys come back and talk to me. But we're talking about being able to put a distance between our guys. All right, so the next movement technique is going to be traveling Overwatch. Now, this is where you're saying we're going to have a little bit more distance. We are maybe expecting that there might be some enemy contact in the area. We still want to move decently quickly, and we're going to put 50 meters of separation at a minimum between the trail element, the trail person in our leading element and the first person in our trail element. All right, and I get it. If we're looking at ADRP 3-21.8, okay, there's a lot more people in there. I got that. This is for the guerrilla force, right? 6 is probably a really big number, and 50 meter separation is probably decently important if you're going to be doing traveling. However, I suggest for these extra small units that you actually just do an Overwatch and watch each other move, right? So let's go ahead and get into Overwatch. All right, this is probably the best way that I can explain Overwatch for you guys, because it doesn't have to be just this, right? It can be a hillside, it can be just distance. But what you want to do is maybe reach out to that effective engagement range that's going to be different per person and different per weapon system, right? If you guys are really awesome Nats-ass snipers and you think you can get 300 yards away from each other easily, then yeah, go ahead and do 300 yards and then use bounding movements, and we'll go over bounding here in a second just to show you guys. However, I think that for most general purpose rifle guys, or the guerrilla who is using a general purpose rifle, 150 meters is probably really good. Why 150 meters? Well, if there's an enemy 300 meters away, you can probably still take effective shots on that enemy 300 yards away or 300 meters away, and still give your guys who are 150 yards away from you some really good cover by fire or really good effects on target, and still be able to maneuver after, right? You want to be able to effectively maneuver, you want to be able to effectively see where the enemy is and make some kind of communication to your other element so that they don't have to deal with the enemy, right? Because bypass is actually a thing. You are allowed to bypass. It means you're not fighting the enemy, you're just walking around them, right? So you can bypass. So what is that going to kind of look like? Well, it's going to start off with, hey, we're probably meeting up somewhere. We're going to go do our infiltration or whatever. right? We're going to do our infiltration. Hey, you guys get up there to a point where you can see and effectively engage targets, just in case. And what we're going to do is move as an element, maybe that 150 yards. We find another area, maybe a hill or something, where we can observe the area, and we're going to allow you to either make a successive bound, meaning you're kind of coming online with us, you're just a little bit in a different location, or you're going to conduct an alternating bound, meaning you move forward of our location, but we still have eyes on you and can still engage targets effectively, probably at that 100 to 150 yards, relatively easy, so we can still pick out a man-sized target, identify said man-sized target, and if we got to eliminate said man-sized target. Or just say, hide, wait here, we're going to chill out and wait a minute because, again, bypass is super effective. All right, so let's get into movement formation. So this is a line, right? You're abreast. You guys are all getting ready to have interlocking sectors of fire directly in front of you. This is used quite a bit whenever you are clearing an objective, especially if you have just made contact, you get online, or make your lazy W as long as you're behind cover or concealment, or cover and concealment if you can, because cover and concealment is what we're looking for, but you're basically just in a straight line. This is a fire team wedge, and this is one of the most overused movement formations for a purpose, right? It works really fantastic. Usually what this guy is actually going to do is turn around every 30 or so-ish seconds to cover the rear, and it works fantastically if you are, a small element, and you have multiple other fire teams with you, right? Because a squad is 9. But if you're not a squad, this isn't something that I would personally suggest. And we'll go over what I would suggest for a guerrilla group if you were doing the infantry stuff, right? If you were doing the walking around, then I would actually suggest something a little bit different. And we'll go over that here in a minute. But this is what the fire team wedge looks like. And I'll show you with the 6-man group what I would do for a fire team wedge. All right, so I've got some littles with me at the moment, so if y'all hear them, try to ignore them. If you can't, then whatever. So if you do have a group of 6, I would suggest splitting that element into either 2 sections of 3 or 3 sections of 2. That part doesn't really matter. It just depends on what you guys want to do, right? But this is what your fire team wedge is going to look like whenever you split them up into 2 groups. All right, so the next movement formation is going to be the file. We're basically getting into single file line. You don't really have good fires to your 6 o'clock or your 12 o'clock, but you do have okay fires to your flanks, left and right. This movement formation is a V. It's not one that I have personally ever used unless you're doing like a T going through a hallway. And I just don't recommend them in the field for much of any reason. It is a formation that we use with helicopters and aircraft, but if you're going to be using it as people, I don't understand why. Just use a wedge. It's like a backward wedge. Not really a big deal. You also have box, which is not something that I would ever suggest. I've never had to use it. This is for an extremely small unit, and the twin to the box is literally just the diamond, right? And you only are using the diamond if you're trying to protect somebody in the middle most of the time, 90% of the time, or if you're a really small unit. Right, so this is an echelon left. I use echelon left and echelon right. This is actually what I would suggest. All right, so now that my mini gorillas are out of here, my little chimps, the echelon left and echelon right, okay, yeah, that kind of sort of makes sense. Well, why and how would you use those if you're a gorilla small unit, right? And we're specifically talking about using a 4-man team or a 3-man team, right? For a 3-man team, I would just keep you all very close together. Not a big deal. Just do a wedge or just do an echelon left or just do an echelon right. But if you have 4 and have the ability to conduct Overwatch, then I would split you guys off and have, well, somebody is able to do Overwatch, right? and you would just do successive Overwatch, meaning, hey, I've already cleared this area, you move to me. All right, cool, man. Well, we're going to move up to you, and now we're going to keep an eye on you for that 150-yard stretch or 150-meter stretch while you move up again, right? Notice how I am moving the team lead and machine gunner together because it is most definitely beneficial to have someone who understands how to control a mass casualty producing weapon such as a machine gun or a grenade launcher, whatever you guys happen to have, right? Or one of those catastrophic, something that I think would probably work at a very close range, right? You'd have to be at close ambush distance, and that would be 35 meters or in. Something that would work at a very close range is if you are running a drum-fed 12-gauge shotgun, right, that is semi-automatic or automatic available, right? So if I had 4 people or the availability to use 4 people, then I would just say, split off, do echelon left with one of them, do echelon right with the other one, and just make sure you guys are using the Overwatch movement technique, and I would use successive bounds, meaning you're meeting up together. Hey, we're coming up. All right, cool. We're moving again. We're moving to you. We're moving again, right? So, and then just have that 150-yard distance between you because you can effectively engage targets at 150 yards relatively easily. You're not pushing out to that 300-yard or 300-meter maximum that a general-purpose rifleman can probably quite easily hit, right? So that is my suggestion. Like I said, echelon left with an echelon right in trail, ensuring that you guys have 150 yards between the two of you. Now, if there's only the two of you, I would probably do something that I would call the wingman. Wingman theorem is more of we're staying probably 100 yards away from each other. I move and you're moving with me, and we're kind of doing a traveling Overwatch if we can, but your skill level for everything just has to be so high, right? If one of you doesn't know or understand land nav, then you're stuck in a not good boat, right? I would still say go ahead and just do bounding Overwatch where the team lead moves first, checks and sees if it is safe to go, and then the second person in that cell moves up to the team lead, checks, and goes, hey man, just you go on ahead. We're still going to do our successive bounds, and then we'll just meet up together, right, as we're going along, conducting seals and all that stuff. The big trade-off whenever you're using Overwatch, right? Overwatch is extremely slow, but it has the most security. Well, whenever you're 2 little guys, you need the most security, right? The cool thing about this is you can totally use this for vehicles if you have vehicles, and I will go over movement in and around and attacking with and using vehicles. But suffice it to say, you can use bounding Overwatch with a couple of technicals, right? Or just moving a wedge, or this is an echelon left, right? Or just move, hey, I'm going to be moving forward, finding a good position for said vehicle, and then doing a successive bound with my other vehicle, right? You're still going to want to have some distance between the two of you, but that is pretty much the game, guys. That's pretty much it. You don't have to get too thick into the weeds over here. Notice how I didn't even get into sectors of fire. That is something that you should probably be able to figure out, right? You went 360 security, as in you have 360 degree of eyeballs on your immediate area, right? So that's kind of how I would do it. Again, you guys are probably going to see these 6-man, right? And I get it, they're toys, whatever. You're going to see these 6-man and 4-man short squad and large team, right? So with 6 people, you end up with 2 short fire teams, but at least you can do a base of fire. And then with 4 homies, you're going to end up with 2 very, very small teams, especially whenever we get into fire and maneuver, right? Because fire and maneuver is where it's at, right? You need to have fires to enable your guys to maneuver. Notice the bases are red. These guys are my red cell trade-offs here. And we will go over, how to effectively use a small red cell group against blue 4 and white cell, namely white cell, right? White cell is always in Minecraft. White cell is always the enemy. But we'll go over how to use these against blue 4 as well. This has been Red Cell Guerrilla in transmission.